Come, all you people, come now and worship the Lord. What a great invitation. I'm so grateful that we have an option for live worship on Sunday mornings at 9:30 and also worship online, which premieres at 5 o'clock on Sunday evenings. I'm glad you found us and have chosen the time to spend together with us today. Our worship today centers on the theme of good intentions. Speaking of which, it is our intention and hope to know you better. If you are new to this experience and have just found us, please send us a note at office@lavergnecob.org and tell us about yourself. We would be glad to hear more of your story. You can find all kinds of opportunities on our website, including information about how to give to the Laverne Church of the Brethren to help us continue our work of mission and ministry. So let's breathe and center ourselves for worship.
Please join in the call to worship. In the midst of a world where people hunger and thirst, come worship a God who feeds the hungry. In the midst of a world where people are abused and oppressed, come worship a God who calls for compassion and justice. In the midst of a world filled with wars and rumor of war, come worship a God who desires nothing less than peace for the world. In the midst of a world of spiritual emptiness, come worship a God who gives life meaning. Come worship a God whose grace and love know no end. Please join me in prayer. In this moment, may our hearts find resonance with your presence, O God, the always already light giver, peacemaker, love sustainer, truth teller, hope increaser, justice builder, unity keeper. May we find resonance with your presence, O God. Amen.
Brothers and sisters of mine are the hungry who sigh in their sorrow and weep in their pain. Sisters and brothers of mine are the homeless who wait without shelter from wind and the rain. Strangers and neighbors, they claim my attention. They sleep by my doorstep, they sit on my bed. Neighbors and strangers, their anguish concerns me, and I must not face the hungry are fed. People are they, men and women and children, and each has a heart beating time with my own. People are they, persons made in God's image, so what shall I offer them, bread or a stone? Lord of all living, we made our confession. Too long we have wasted our wealth of our lands. Lord of all loving, we know our compassion. and open our hearts while we reach out our hands.
If my people who are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray. If my people who are called by my name shall seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven.
From Proverbs 16, verses 1 to 3. The intentions of the heart belong to a person, but the answer of the tongue comes from God. All a person's ways seem right in that person's opinion, but God evaluates the motives. Commit your works to God, and your plans will be established.
You remember the story of Joseph in the Old Testament, how he was the youngest of 12 brothers, but his mother's favorite. She even made him an expensive coat of many colors. None of the others got one of those. How out of jealousy, his brothers sold him to a passing caravan, and he wound up as a slave in Egypt. How he then came into favor of the Pharaoh, who made him the overseer of the entire nation's food reserves. And then his brothers come up from Palestine to get food during the famine, and Joseph forgives them in a dramatic display of mercy and compassion. That's the way we remember it. Joseph, the man with the plan, the man of intention, the hero who saves the day, who saves Egypt. You might be interested in another version of that story. In Parashat Varagash, a Hebrew interpretation of the Torah, it's a bit different. Joseph's good intentions go sour. He has his hands full managing the 7 years of catastrophic famine that has followed 7 years of prosperity, but the Egyptian people are now starving because the government has all of the grain. And the people's ability to buy grain from the government disappears along with their savings. And the famine has yet to play out its course, and so this is where it all begins to fall apart. Joseph begins to collect their possessions for the Pharaoh in exchange for food. First their livestock, and then their property, and finally their personhood. To avoid death, the Egyptian people become slaves to Pharaoh, foreshadowing the Israelite enslavement in the Exodus. Well, at least they have something to eat. Does the end justify the means? The ethicist Leon Cass doesn't think so, condemning Joseph for introducing into Egypt the idea that human beings can be owned by the state. Quote, Israel is cursed by Joseph's policies. Joseph's consolidation of Pharaoh's power will result in the practice of wholesale slavery. Thanks to Joseph's authoritarian policies, Egypt is transformed into a nation of slaves, and Pharaoh becomes Egypt's absolute master. End quote. Sometimes the best of intentions can lead to tragic outcomes. Joseph's policy echoes down through history. Debt bondage is not just an ancient problem. It is the most prevalent form of slavery today, with millions of modern slaves serving as bonded laborers. And while it's most often found in India and Southeast Asia, incidents of debt bondage can be found all over the world. Like Egypt's 7 years of famine, debt bondage often starts with some kind of small, short-term financial crisis, faced with an urgent medical issue in the family, or a bad harvest, or the car doesn't work. A person borrows a small sum, but there are additional fees and interests and penalties, balloon the loan beyond its original size. Unable to repay the loan, the borrower becomes enslaved to his or her creditor, who might also, in some societies, sell the children of the debtor against the debt. But no one faced with starvation or a critically ill family member could ever envision that the act of simply taking a loan would lead to enslavement, violence, poverty for generations. Yet it happens. And here's the piece we don't like to hear. We all benefit from it. We are all complicit in it. Slave-produced goods are ubiquitous in American markets. Last month, the United States Department of Labor released a list of 122 goods produced in 58 countries and imported to the United States that are the work of child or forced labor. These include some imports of everyday products like cotton, coffee, sugarcane, cocoa. With all of the prosperity in today's world, no one should be forced to make the choice that lay before the Egyptians of Joseph's day, freedom or starvation, especially when the consequences can potentially last for generations. But we could interrupt this cycle through the choices we make as consumers and the steps we take as activists if we simply open our eyes to the injustice in our midst, we could see the path toward ending slavery in our lifetime. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, someone said. I absolutely love that maxim. Whoever came up with that is an incredible genius. It helps explain many of the problems in the world. Very few people have bad intentions. But most of the problems in the world are caused by what start out as good intentions. They may not seem good to us, but they seem good to the one who's taking the action. Good intentions alone are not enough to make our actions moral. Case in point, Christopher Columbus. Since this is Columbus Day weekend, I thought we might think a little bit about him. If you grew up in my generation in the United States, you might have been taught that Columbus was that courageous, far-sighted hero who discovered America in 1492. You even probably memorized that little saying, didn't you? But you know, he wasn't the first European in America. He didn't discover anything that millions of indigenous people who lived here didn't already know existed. He didn't land on the North American continent. He landed in Haiti. He thought he was in the East Indies, Indonesia, south of the Philippines, south of Vietnam. That's where he thought he was. And so he called the natives Indians, and it stuck. Here's something you might not know about Christopher Columbus. He was uber religious. He was. He wasn't Spanish, but as you remember, he was sailing for the Spanish king and queen, Ferdinand and Isabella, to bring back spices and gold to make them rich. Why? Because Ferdinand was the only European monarch who had any success in the Crusades. And Columbus believed that if he could make Ferdinand rich, he could go to Jerusalem and throw out the Muslims and rebuild the temple, and then Jesus would come. And Columbus could make that happen. His diaries are full of that stuff. You think I'm kidding, don't you? It's true. Now, you and I think about that and go, what? And we are not likely to look past the whole Crusades business in the first place, especially from a pacifist perspective. And I don't know about you, but the whole build the temple and he will come thing sounds just crazy. But that form of piety was really not unusual for his time. Religion soared during the Renaissance in the 15th century. New cathedrals, new monasteries, new convents, a great surge in the writing and circulation of devotional literature like Thomas à Kempis' Imitation of Christ. Sacraments, rituals, mysticism, pilgrimages, education. The sky's the limit. We can do it. Let's do it. Let's build that temple. We can entice God. That was the culture of the Renaissance. Columbus was all about that. Now, I don't know if you're willing to even give Columbus that much credit. But you might at least say that given his time and culture, if all of that was true, he was well-intentioned. But if that's true, then this is certainly a case where the best of intentions can lead to tragic outcomes. After Christopher Columbus stumbled upon the island we know as Haiti some 520 years ago, he systematically killed, tortured, enslaved, and all but destroyed the indigenous Taino people. While Columbus and his crew are sometimes lumped in with all of the other conquest crazy Europeans of their era, their particular cruelty can't be overlooked, shouldn't be ignored. Natives were regularly whipped and tortured for minor offenses, stealing a vegetable. Columbus took Taino women and gifted them to his crewmen who would violently beat and abuse them. Columbus established a business in the sale of 9 and 10-year-old Taino girls for sexual slavery. He also kidnapped and enslaved Tainos for a slave trade in his voyage back to Europe. What a jerk. Columbus was a murdering, enslaving, sexual abusing, treacherous colonizer to the people he encountered in the Caribbean. And his practice of taking other people's lands in the Americas sparked the European imagination, and those lands would soon become the backbones of empires. What followed were centuries of oppression to the human beings who lived there and to the land they lived on. Spain, France, England, later the United States, brought in enslaved Africans to cultivate sugar to satisfy European palates. Haiti remains the poorest country in all of the Americas. And it isn't because of some innate curse on Haiti. It's because their peoples and their labor, their lands and their resources have long been embezzled without reparation. The insidious nature of the colonization of the Americas, which started in Haiti because Columbus had a dream, a religious intention, created a system that kept indigenous peoples in slavery or perpetual poverty to this very day, including the Kitch Tonga people of Southern California. There is a straight line from the genocidal practices of Columbus to the enslavement of Africans that first started in Haiti, to Thomas Jefferson's refusal to recognize the Republic of Haiti, to the U.S. invasion of Haiti in 1816, and all of the rest, right down to the horrendous and horrifying treatment and deportation of Haitian migrants by the U.S. Border Patrol just 4 weeks ago. Talk about critical race theory. Let's begin by getting that story straight. At any rate, it's why so many of us roll our eyes at the idea of celebrating Columbus Day and instead prefer to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day. When good intentions go bad, what can Joseph and Columbus teach us? Well, first of all, good intentions are not bad in themselves, right? We all need an aim, a purpose, a plan in life, time-tested beliefs like work hard, love others, and by definition, sacrifice for them, your family, your loved ones, respect others, speak the truth, believe in what you do, stay healthy, principles, intentions. If you've ever walked the labyrinth, you might know that the sixth station is the station of intention, where you are invited to think about living out your purpose this year, this day, this hour, this moment. Each is ripe for something. Can you make a distinction between what is important and what is urgent? Which are you doing? What are you eager to do? What are your hopes and dreams? Dare to have a purpose firm. Get out of your rut. Someone once said that a rut is just a grave with the ends kicked out. What is your heart's desire this week, this month, this year? Good intentions are not bad. We wrap our lives around them and they serve as an anchor. But secondly, we should be clear that our intentions are as healthy and whole as we hope and believe they are. It might be my plan to live in an RV and travel around the U.S. for the next 30 years, searching out the best pie ever made. But if I ask my wife about that, I may have to rethink that plan. How do I know if my intentions are healthy and whole? Well, I can start by asking, is it scriptural? Is it something that Jesus would do? I can read more about it. Certainly, I can ask my doctor or my therapist or maybe one of you. I mean, where were the people of God when Jacob was working out his system of slavery? Or when Columbus went off half-cocked? But thirdly, good intentions require right means. The ends do not always justify the means. You might want to be elected senator or congressman of your state, but if you devise a plan where a great number of people, black and brown, can't vote for your opponent, you've crossed a line. You might believe in personal freedom and don't want to wear a mask, but if that endangers children and others who are around you, you've crossed over a line. You might feel strongly about the morality of being pro-life, but if you are willing to take freedom away from women with unwanted pregnancies, silence doctors, and strip reproductive health care away from millions of low-income people, stand by while the maternal mortality rates skyrocket and women, especially black women, die in childbirth, you might have entirely imagined that there never was a line. If you believe in peace among nations, but you're willing to support the killing of your enemies. If you say that you love your family, but you aren't willing to give them your time, your help, your love. If you believe that all lives matter, but you can't endorse the idea that black lives matter or LGBTQ lives matter, if you believe so fervently in your cause that you are willing to lie, cheat, and steal for that cause, if you feel hatred for someone who disagrees with you and you foster harmful designs against them, if you engage in violence against an adversary or opponent online or in person, you probably crossed a line. Martin Luther King Jr. stated, on some positions, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position, he says, that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but he must take it because it is right. In this church, let's be clear about who we intend to be and how we plan to get there. I appreciated Pastor Susan's words in her sermon about the legacy of this congregation as a bold, courageous, loving, purposeful people. And that's right. And may I say that Pastor Susan and Pastor Donna have played a big part in helping us get there. We are a church that continues the work of Jesus peacefully, simply together. Is that right? Say that's right. We are a church called by Christ to be inclusive, caring, and peace-minded, and we mean it. We affirm that people of any race, ethnic identity, gender identity, sexual orientation, ability, age, economic status, faith tradition, or life situation are welcome in this congregation. Is that right? Say that's right. This church believes in compassionate service, stewardship of creation, respect for diversity, and nonviolent reconciliation for differences among all people and nations, and we're not about to move away from that intention. Is that right? Say that's right. We claim no creed but the New Testament as exemplified by the life of Christ, and we seek to follow the way of Jesus. Is that right? Say that's right. We humbly stand today and proclaim, where hatred soars, we will speak of love. Where fear stalks, we will stand with courage. Where racism rises, we will call for justice. Where pain overwhelms, we will extend comfort and compassion. Where systems oppress, we will work for change. Now and ever. Now and ever. Now and evermore. Amen. May our lives, our love, our faith and acts reflect the wonder and holiness of God's presence in the world. Amen.